If you wanted to look younger in ancient Rome, you had options. Imported Egyptian coal for the eyes, crushed berries for the lips, powdered chalk for the skin. Rome was a city of over 1 million people and a functioning cosmetics industry, and most of it was exactly what you'd expect. And then there was Gloios. Gloios was what you got when you scraped a gladiator down after training. The oil, the sweat, the dead skin cells, the arena floor. All of it, collected in a jar, given a name, and sold at a premium outside the gladiatorial schools. Roman women bought it for their faces. They knew what it was. That was the point. The men they wore it for generally did not. History has, perhaps wisely, not recorded what happened when they found out. Rome had a lot of markets. This, it turns out, was one of the more popular ones. This is that story. Here is how Gloios worked and why Rome thought it made sense. Roman athletes trained while oiled. This was standard practice. Olive oil applied before exercise, scraped off afterward with a curved metal tool called a strigil. You pressed the edge along the skin and dragged. What came off was oil, sweat, dead skin cells, and whatever the arena floor had added to the situation, which in a gladiatorial school was its own category of material. All of it went into a container. Then someone sold it. The gladiatorial version commanded the best prices, and the reasoning was, by Roman standards, completely sound. Gladiators were the physically exceptional men in Rome, tested, trained, surviving things that killed other people on a regular basis. If vitality concentrated anywhere in the human body, and Romans believed firmly that it did, it was concentrated in them. What came off their strigil was, by this logic, a distilled extract of the finest specimens the empire had available. Pliny the Elder documented this in natural history. He documented it between his section on bird migration and his section on gemstones in exactly the same tone he used for both. No pause, no raised eyebrow. Pliny had 800 medicinal plants to get through. He didn't have time for an editorial. The recorded uses, joint pain, skin conditions, and something Pliny files under general restoration, which is the ancient equivalent of supports overall wellness and carries roughly the same evidentiary weight. Women applied it to their faces. Some sources suggest it was blended into other preparations, which is to say, Rome had a luxury skincare product with one active ingredient and no label, because writing down the ingredient was only necessary if the buyer didn't already know what they were buying. Now, if you are imagining the gladiatorial schools as rough, informal operations tucked away in back streets, they weren't. The 4 major ludi in Rome, the ludus magnus, the ludus dacicus, the ludus gallicus, the ludus matutinus, were large institutions owned and funded by the imperial government. They had housing, they had trained medical staff, they had dietitians who planned the fighters' meals down to the calorie, which is either impressive or deeply strange, depending on how you feel about the rest of what was happening. They also had, it turns out, a side operation running out of the service entrance. The Roman government built the schools. The cosmetics industry handled the distribution. Nobody thought to write this down as if it needed explaining, which is itself a kind of explanation. The Gloios, it should be said, was the respectable end of the market. After a gladiatorial fight, not everyone left immediately. Some people moved closer, with purpose, with containers. This was not looting, this was medicine, and the distinction mattered very much to everyone involved. If someone in your family had epilepsy, and in Rome, many families did, you knew what that looked like. Seizures without warning, in the street, at dinner, in the forum. No physician who could reliably stop it, no explanation for why it happened, no way to predict when it would happen again. A freshly killed gladiator in that context was not desperate folklore, it was the considered option. The belief, documented in Pliny, referenced by the medical writer Celsus, was this: gladiators were the most vital men alive. Their blood, taken warm, carried something a failing body could use. Rome called epilepsy the morbus comitialis, the assembly disease. A seizure in the Forum Romanum was enough to cancel all public business for the day. The empire that administered 3 million square miles could not, constitutionally speaking, handle one man falling down. Gladiatorial blood was not desperation. It was the considered option in a city that had considered all the others. Pliny, who recorded this, is not a credulous writer. He names fraudulent physicians and explains why they're frauds. He dismisses remedies he considers superstition. He includes the blood practice because it was observed, administered, and produced results people reported, and Pliny decided that was enough to put in the book. Then he moved on to the next entry. He had a lot of ground to cover. The logical chain held together, by the way. It was wrong. The transfer of vitality through blood is not how any of this works, but they had no neurons, no synapses, no working theory of what the brain does. The conclusion followed from what they had. It also, for what it's worth, made considerably more sense than the bloodletting European medicine would spend the next 1,000 years enthusiastically promoting instead. Galen, same Galen who stitched gladiator wounds at Pergamon, same Galen who appears every time this period needs a medical witness, worked in a city where his patient's blood had an established market price and buyers who knew where to find them. He noted this. He had more patients. The gladiatorial games ended in the early 5th century. The customers made other arrangements. When the gladiators ran out, the supply chain found new suppliers. Executioners across Germany and Scandinavia sold blood from public beheadings to families managing epilepsy. Known pricing, known buyers, recorded in the sources as ordinary commerce, which, by this point, should not surprise anyone. China ran a parallel operation. Blood from public executions, taken directly or collected on steamed bread, was used against tuberculosis. Different disease, same logic. A man healthy enough to survive to his execution date was carrying something worth transferring. The bread was incidental. In the late 19th century, families were still arriving at public executions in Northern Europe with containers. To put that in context, Pasteur had published germ theory. Koch had identified the specific bacterium responsible for the tuberculosis this blood was being administered to treat. The full scientific explanation for why none of this worked existed in print in multiple languages, available to anyone who went looking. The market continued anyway. The gladiatorial logic outlasted the gladiators by 1,500 years, which is, if you stop and think about it, an extraordinary innings for a beauty product. The Gloios trade had its own bookkeeping. By the 2nd century AD, some schools were recording it in their accounts alongside ticket revenue and fighter contracts, which means somewhere a clerk was doing the arithmetic on this. That ledger entry lives in academic footnotes now. It is the closest thing to a legacy the product ever received. The modern version is quieter, a Michael Jordan playoff towel sold at auction for nearly $5,000. Celebrity bathwater has found buyers on eBay. Napoleon's hair changes hands more often than most Roman senatorial estates ever did. The product has changed. The underlying belief that extraordinary bodies leave something behind worth having has not moved and shows no sign of being argued out of existence anytime soon. The Gladiator didn't leave a review. He had training in the morning. The market, it turned out, was considerably more durable than he was.